Hey everybody. I want to take a quick moment to give an update on where things are going with the podcast. If you subscribed and you're following, you know that it's been a little while since there's been a new episode, and realistically, I had to take a short mental break. Racism, systemic racism, being black in America, in and of itself is a tough load to bear in general. In this podcast, in the way that I want to be able to inform and not just give speculation, but actually give facts and data, and all those things takes a lot, just in research, but also just the heavy load in general. Much of what I talk about in these episodes, I already know to be true from experience, but I don't want to offer you speculation. I want to give you actual facts and data and backup. And also the things that I think I know, there are sometimes where I have parts of it wrong, and I find that out in the research as well. And so the research that goes into sort of the deep dives and the historical aspects and explaining some of the issues of systemic racism, it's a lot. Because we live in a world where, for most of America, people are just waking up to the idea that systemic racism is real and has been happening and that something needs to be done. But for people of color, this has been life. And so we live this, and making a podcast about what you've lived through and are currently living through is sometimes hard. And I work in podcasting. I produce multiple podcasts. I've been in media for years. I work in storytelling, but this is the first foray that I've sort of taken where I am the storyteller, and the stories do have a connection back to me. And in that, I guess I didn't really prepare myself for the mental load that came with that and the processing of it as well. Specifically looking at the Black on Black crime episode and talking about law enforcement and its roots and all of those things, I was drained when it was done. I've had many experience with law enforcement that have not been great. In fact, the majority of them haven't. And a lot of it comes down to stereotyping and brutality and these things. And so putting together an episode that is so closely tied to my experience really sort of depleted my energy levels, and infected me in all other areas as well. And so I had to take a small break. And part of that also is, people like to say that, oh, look how far we've come. We're making all this progress. And on a micro level, sure, we're making progress. Juneteenth is coming up, depending on when you listen to this. And there are a lot more places and cities and states who are recognizing Juneteenth. It's becoming a paid holiday. People are getting the time off. There are numerous Juneteenth celebrations happening all over the country. You have people who are talking about reparations at this point. We are making strides in looking at DEI work in the workplace and in communities. There are a lot of things that are happening separately, all around the country that are at a very micro level progress. But when you take a step back and look, we have 48 out of 50 states, I think was the last time I looked, that are looking at putting in laws that are going to suppress voting. We have school systems that are looking at banning the discussion of critical race theory, arguing that, racism is a topic that's too hard for kids to understand, even though if your child is a person of color, they're dealing with racism day in and day out. So it's hard to understand for who. Looking at the idea that we want to whitewash history and put it on record, like, let's change history books to remove these things and these phrases and these words. And it's like, well, wait a minute though, like, those things happened. You can't change history. You need to actually tell history so we can learn and move forward. And so looking at, police brutality still happening in the world. It's still not safe for persons of color. Looking at what's happening to Asian Americans and just all of these things, it's hard to create in a world in which what you're talking about is still happening and not let that affect you. And so it was a lesson in processing. And so I had to take a break. And I'm not a fan of the season model. So that wasn't season 1 and we're moving into season 2. I had to take a mental break, and figure out the best way for me to move forward with the podcast, delivering it the way that I want to, the same professional level of quality of the research and what's going into it and finding guests, but not put myself in a position where I couldn't function because of the amount of heavy lifting. So there was a small break. I didn't see it coming ahead of time. Again, after the last episode, it was like writing a term paper. And, if you've ever written a big paper afterwards, you know that you're drained and it's hard to function. And that's really what it was like. I sort of gave birth to this episode, and not that I'm belittling childbirth or saying that it's easy or that I understand it, but it was this creation that took a lot out of me. And I realized that I have to allocate the time and the mental resources and the space physically and mentally to be able to continue to put out an episode like that. So I plan on peppering in more interviews so that I can work on bigger deep dives, but not do it all at once, and things of that nature, so that I can still put this out. So the podcast, long story short, is still happening. This is just a quick update, and then, depending on when you listen to this, the next episode will happen a week later. So there will be a new episode coming out, and it'll go back to the every other week schedule for now. And I just wanted to update everyone. And one last update, I have created a Patreon, to help, in support of the research and the time that goes into this podcast. The Patreon, includes, there's some swag, because who doesn't love swag? But there's also levels where, we can create a community and a group so that we can continue these discussions about being anti-racist and what's going on in the world and in the news, and help people sort of understand how to think about it, some of the history behind it, and put it in context. And so there's different tiers and levels that have different levels of access and things that you'll get. And so if you're so moved and you have the ability, please think about contributing to the Patreon. It will help dramatically as far as, just time and being able to go through and do it and putting out this at this level still. And so, yeah, that's the update. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sticking through and sort of waiting through this hiatus. If you haven't, subscribe, follow on whatever platform you're on. If you're on Apple, please leave a review. It helps the podcast grow and get found by others. So until next week, thank you very much.